Shalom, this is Israel at War, an update from Jerusalem, from TV7 Israel News. I'm Amir Peretz, sitting in for Jonathan Hassan. And tomorrow, July 12th, will be the 280th day for Israel to be involved in a war which started on October the 7th in Gaza and is going on two fronts at least, because on October the 8th, Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite militia, started attacking Israel too, in conjunction with Hamas. It so happens that July 12th, tomorrow, will also be the 18th anniversary of the Second Lebanon War between Israel and Hezbollah. We have with us two distinguished guests, two reserve brigadier generals in the Israeli Air Force. Welcome, Doron Gavish, the former commanding general of the Israeli Air Force's air and missile defense, and currently in a similar position in the air and missile task force. Hi, Doron.
Hello.
And Brigadier General Relik Shafir, a former fighter pilot and commanding officer of the Tel Nof Air Base, one of the main operating bases of the Israel Air Force, where they have fighter jets, helicopters, some other units, and drones too. General Gavish, let me ask you, we have witnessed earlier this week an incident in the Golan Heights where there was an attack by Hezbollah, a rocket or missile attack. There were alerts which sounded in the various towns and villages. The practice is to not sound the alert in military bases, and there are several military bases on the Golan Heights, and not on the so-called open spaces or open sites, including the roads. And it so happened that one of the vehicles which passed on the road, not too far from a divisional headquarters, which is an obvious target for Hezbollah, suffered a direct hit, and two civilians were killed, a married couple. Maybe they didn't even know that there was an alert. Earlier, the Home Front Command suggested that people either use the application for the alerts, or at least when they drive between various points, not to have the air conditioning on, but drive with open windows so that they can at least hear if there are attacks. What can be done about such incidents in the future?
Well, first, it is important to say, Amir, and we mentioned it here more than once, that when we're talking about the defending of the people or installations, there are two main means that we're using. One of them is the active means, which mean actively intercepting the incoming projectiles. And the other one is the passive one, and those are the alerts and, of course, the people following it, going to the shelters. Or if you are on the road, you are supposed to stop your car on the side of the road and to move aside from it and to lie on the ground. Those are the orders, and we all know that it saves life. And of course, if this would happen this time, it would save the life of this couple. I can't say what exactly happened in this particular situation, but unfortunately we know what is the end result. But as it was said by the Home Front Command, those are really what are the mainly when you are in such an area, like in the northern part of Israel, you have to be very alert as much as you can. Open the window, to be with the applications, and once the sound of the alert will be heard, you have to do what you are expected to do, or to go to the shelter or out of your car, as I just mentioned. So we don't know exactly what happened, why they didn't hear it, but it was very, very unfortunate that it was a direct hit. Very rare something like this happened, but unfortunately, when there are so many rockets that were shot toward Israel, we also can see such a case. Up to now, there were around 20,000 rockets that were shot toward Israel. We didn't have, unfortunately, something like this, and now it happened. Very unfortunate, but also very rare.
So if there have been 20,000 rockets and the air and missile defense units would not have had to discriminate between the various targets about to be hit, that would mean that Israel would have had to expand 20,000 or perhaps double that number just to be safe in order to intercept those incoming rockets. And this is impossible economically, and therefore, even though the rocket attack was identified on the radar screen and the system worked in a way which showed the commanders of the unit or the computer, whatever the algorithm is, that it is not going to hit an inhabited population center. Nevertheless, if Israel had an unlimited number of interceptor missiles, it would have taken down this rocket.
You're right, Amir. The way that we are fighting the rockets, by the way, we have to say, of course, that we are not fighting them only on the defense. The way of fighting is trying to eliminate as much as you can or to punish them when they were shot through the Air Force on the attack side, then the alert, and then the active and the passive defense. This is the full array. But you're right that in order not to fight the numbers, the idea is that if it goes to an open areas, so you just let it fall. By the way, in this case, it was next to a base, so bases are also defended. So probably in this area there was a kind of alert. But anyway, yes, this is the way that Israel works. This is why we hear that it was shot to an open area. Statistically, once again, we have to say that during the last 8 months, there were 10 casualties within Israel from such rockets. So, of course, each one of them is super important to us and to his family. But in military terms, out of 20,000 rockets, this is not a big number, of course.
General Shafir, time flies, not only you pilots, but also time flies. And there have recently graduated new fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, and transport pilots from the prestigious Air Academy of the Air Force, people who I believe were born towards the end of your own career in the Air Force. How does such a period where the most recent 9 months, the Israel Air Force spent flying continuously, various sorties, bombing, medivac, drones, how does that impact newly minted pilots who were cadets over the last period of their education?
I think it drives their motivation up because their peers, those who went to school with them and volunteered for combat service on the ground, have already seen extensive combat in Gaza mainly, but also on the northern border. These are people who were conscripted 3 years ago, those who graduated. So as they graduate, and they're still not operational, they'll be operational within about a year, which means that it's 4 years from their conscription until they see actual fighting from the air. I think they're keen to take part so that they can equal their peers who are already battle proven. So I think it drives the motivation up, and the fact that the Air Force was so uh, important and took a major role in the war in Gaza, but not only there, also with continuous, I would say, subjugation of Iranian munition sent to Syria and Lebanon with operational sorties both in Syria and Lebanon, that puts the new cadets into an operational environment in the operational squadrons that they will reach within about half a year. It will take them a half a year more to become operational themselves. And so it'll drive their motivation up, and they, I guess, hope they can take part in the battle for Israel's independence as it ensues now.
The other day, there was a change of command in the Palmachim Air Base announced by the Israel Air Force. And Palmachim is somewhat similar to your own base, Tel Nof, in having a composite wing. Not only one sort of planes, in this case helicopters, but also the commando units of the Air Force, Shaldag and another one, and drones. Does that put a heavier load on a commanding officer who comes from one community, in your case, fighters, when you have to supervise people who came up through another professional ladder and are supposedly better at it than you are in helicopters or drones or whatever?
Well, it is I would say, an operational challenge. How do you direct and command people who have a different profession from you, and how do you become an authority on things that you're not exactly a professional? So this is a question of delegation of authority and personality. In my own case, I was lucky enough to have about a year before I took over command of Tel Nof, and I flew the big CH-53s for about a year. I didn't fly F-15s or F-4s, well, with which I had extensive experience, so I could become professional enough in helicopters to be able to withhold an authority in the eyes of the other pilots. But in certain cases, it's your personality and your understanding of the operational situation. But let me surprise you. Sometimes it's even an advantage, because you look at these units from the outside and you may find that some of their operations, some of their drills and administration is not up to par with the top units of another profession. So you can, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you get to a drone unit which is lagging behind for some reason in its operability and its efficiency. You can take the commanders or the operators in that drone squadron and put them for a few days in, let's say, a helicopter squadron that excels in management, and let them be a part of that unit, and then come back with what they've learned there and instill this in their own units. So the fact that there are different types of professions and different types of um, qualitative differences sometimes allows for such an exchange to take place and raise the level of all the units, and that is because they're different. And so you're creating a balanced leverage of quality within that base, and I think that's what most commanders do.
So it's a pool of lessons learned and the best practices. Now, this is not a debate, especially not a presidential debate, and both of you look in shape, in top form. But I would like to ask each of you the same question regarding the hostage deal, the ceasefire, and what Defense Minister Gallant said last night when he was the keynote speaker in a graduation of another class at the National Defense College. Gallant said that this is a unique window of opportunity to conclude the deal, have at least some of the hostages come back alive to Israel, while the parties are still negotiating the next phase, and that whatever risks there are in such a deal, because obviously Hamas too would gain, the IDF and the security forces would be able to take care of them later on. What's your view, Doron Gavish?
Well, we have to go back to the goals of this war, and we have to remember that one of the main goals, of course, was to bring back the hostages. So, and we talked about it mainly during the beginning of the war, that we know that there is a tension between some of those war goals. One of them is the destruction of the Hamas till the win. And the other one, of course, is bringing back the hostages. And we are now seeing this tension when you have to make a decision when you want to take the hostages back, and you know that you might pay some price with regards to the Hamas. And I think this is where Israel is at. And I believe that what is being done today is really to try and to find the right balancing point. What could we do? Of course, for the Israeli public, I think the vast majority of it sees the bringing back the hostages as priority one. I think that within the Israeli public, most of the people sees that everyone understands that the war with the Hamas, probably this would be something that would take for a long time. So things that you wanted to do today, you might do them in the future, but unfortunately, you cannot say the same thing about the hostages, because their time is running. Unfortunately, we saw a few of them that were killed during the time of their being in the as hostages. Some of them, of course, were murdered. We have to remember that there are some women that we don't know what is their exact situation without saying too much about it. And so we are almost 9 months after the 7th of October. So I think this is now what everyone in Israel understands, that probably this is the right thing to do. And I feel that this is also what Minister Gallant was trying to convey.
Eric Shafir, your view? We have to think first strategy. And thinking strategy, we don't want to be viewed by the states in the area, starting from Iran and obviously their proxies, including Hezbollah and Hamas, as if all they have to do is snatch a few of our people and they'll bring us to on our knees. I'm talking about future conflicts. But in this particular case, the people who were taken hostage were civilians, were taken out of their homes. And this is a particular situation which is not the same as soldiers falling as captives or something of that sort. So obviously, strategically, the answer would be that grit your teeth and wait till we end the war and crush them. But the payment for the Israeli society and the I would say the problem of mistrust that a large percentage of the civilians have towards the government and its strategies and tactics had led us to a position where this is mandatory in order to regain trust within Israel and be able to be ready for a long conflict. We're not going back to the 6th of October. We're going into a long conflict with Iran and its proxies. We're going to have to mend our connections with the Western world, the United States and Europe. And the beginning of this would be returning the hostages before we go on to stage two of this war, which will probably come within a year or two of the upcoming ceasefire. So I will have to say that strategically for the Israeli society itself, it's crucial that we get them back before we go into the next phase of the war at this point in time.
You know, it's interesting that both of you reserve generals should be considered on this issue, at least in the moderate camp, which retired Major General Gallant also represents, and of course he has the power to influence decisions. It seems when one hears about the friction between the professionals and the politicians, between the high military command and the prime minister and some of the ministers, with the minister of defense in the middle, that the generals take the long view, which both of you in a way reflected, while the politicians, maybe because of their own political base, tend to be more on the extreme or simplistic. And the question is focused on Yoav Gallant personally. He retired from the IDF some 12 or 13 years ago. He reached the high rank of Major General. He started out as a Navy SEAL, but when he was a Navy captain, he switched to the ground forces and became a general officer. And we did have several other retired officers in this position of ministers of defense. And when there were conflicts between the ministers and the generals, it seems that they have usually sided with their former brothers in arms. What can one learn about Israeli society and politics from this particular fact? Doron.
And you know, this is almost a philosophical question, Amir, when it comes to Ministry of Defense. But you know, it is interesting because General Shafir before mentioned that it might be some advantages when someone who is coming from the outside into an organization, we could see some things that others or those that are from the organization, they have a hard time to see. I can give you, by the way, an example which is relevant for our world of missile defense. There were two decisions made by ministries to purchase systems in order to defend Israel. One of them was Misha Arens, and the other one was Amir Peretz. Most of them, they were not military generals. So, it is very interesting, as I said, the philosophical point of view. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. I think that, like every other thing, it always needs to be balanced. Sometimes it's good that you have someone who's coming from the system, understands the system, but sometimes it is also good that someone is coming from the outside. At the end of the day, each one of them bring their own skills into this particular ministry. But I really think that if you go along with the time, the Ministry of Defense, it's really here in Israel, this is a serious ministry. And most of the people that were serving in this ministry, wherever they came from, you could say that they took this mission very seriously, either it was civilians or those that came from.
For the sake of our non-Israeli viewers, Mr. Ahrens, whom you mentioned, was an aerospace engineer with his own personal angle, and Mr. Peretz happened to have resided in Sderot, which absorbed most of the brunt of the rockets. So he too had a personal experience which many of you officers didn't. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but even more unfortunately, we did not run out of war. And therefore, we will see both of you very soon. This has been Israel at War, an update. Thank you, Doron Gavish. Thank you, Relik Shafir. And thank you to our viewers. We will be back with another edition in a few days' time. This has been Israel at War, an update from TV7 Israel News in Jerusalem.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.